Longtime Crowdsource the Truth viewers are about to be astounded, I think. People might recall, it's been years actually, but there was a co-host who used to join me by the name of Bishop Larry Gaiters, and today we're joined by his daughter Lydia. Lydia, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm well. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Boy, you really do have a sound to your voice that's reminiscent of your father. And before we get
Oh,
into your story, I want to let everybody know, because we've got a lot of new viewers, Lydia. A lot of people have been watching Crowdsource the Truth lately. We've been doing so much work on the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. So there's going to be a lot of
right.
people with us who haven't heard of your father, or at least not in the context
Okay.
of this show. And I just wanted to let people know that he was introduced to me by David Hawkins. And when I determined after several months of working with your father, and I haven't proven this yet, nor have I heard the story that you're about to tell us, but just in our brief conversation, I was quite intrigued by what you had to say, because I believe that your father was set upon David Hawkins as part of a deceptive social engineering campaign that was initiated by Field McConnell, and I'm very interested to hear what you'd like to tell us about it.
Right. Again, thank you so much, Jason, for having me, and to all the viewers here. First and foremost, I give God all the glory, and He's the head of my life. And those who are listening, I just give Him praise to each and every ear into the body of Christ. But yes, my name is Lydia Gaiters. I am my father's daughter. We are very similar in when it comes to our features together. So, um, I remember when I first saw your video. It was probably wasn't that long ago, actually. It was probably, I would say, a month ago when I ran across it. And I noticed it was back in 2020. And I was praying. I said, Lord, I know that there are some things this is very deceptive. He walks in a very deceptive walk. And I was in counsel with a lot of people who I'm accountable to. And I prayed, I said, Lord, it has to be a clear sign to where it says it's either now or never, and I will come out and I will give my story and I'll give a testimony and speak truth to everything. So when I saw your video, I was speaking to my brother that night, and he notified me that my father had blocked him on his social media. And that triggered something in me, because even though my brother, he's a grown man, he's 27 right now, or turning 27 in September, and that triggered something in me to leap into saying, okay, wait a minute, is this my time? So I decided to Google Larry Gaiters exposed. I didn't know if there was much out there or if people really saw behind the smoke and mirrors. And when I saw your video, I got like 20 minutes in, and I heard the Lord say, okay, this is your time. This is it. And no matter how hard it's going to be, no matter how the fire is going to be, I'm here to bring truth to this, and we're going to just set the record straight.
Absolutely. Wow. Now, so people can see, your father and I haven't worked together in quite a while, but he did do quite a few shows with me. And the thing that's interesting about the techniques that your father employs, at least in my experience, he's doing something that in tradecraft and intelligence circles would be called a limited hangout. Because he did actually, obviously your father is an extremely compelling raconteur. He can tell stories and give sermons, and he's a very compelling speaker, charismatic guy. These are also sort of all the characteristics of a con man and a charlatan. And you can see, here's the first video where David introduced us, and he had a lot of information about Barack Obama and the Down Low Club in Chicago. And look, I'm going to be very direct and honest, as I was with your father. I felt that my collaboration with him was important because he could speak to an audience and a demographic that I felt would be less likely to listen to me. If I criticize Barack Obama, it's very easy to say, oh, that's racist and all that. But when
Right.
your father, as a black man, makes those criticisms, people can't quite as easily say that.
Argue
So
back with you. Right.
which video, Lydia, was it that you saw?
The one that triggered the most, where it said the truth, I believe it said exposed Larry Gators, where it was you and another gentleman saying he was a part of a group of social engineers. That's where it began. And if you really put the pieces together, most of videos are very conspiracy theories. For someone to call themselves a bishop, right? To me, that means that you uphold the law of the word, that everything that comes out of your mouth must align with the word of God. So that way, every video that we were seeing and every show that we were seeing was all to deal with news. It dealt with conspiracy theory that had nothing to do with the core heart of the cross or salvation. So that really started to develop a sense of not just discernment, but of grief in the past couple of years, honestly, grief of this individual is putting all of his efforts into these made up stories that have no backing to them. They have no backing. When I see videos, as in I have individuals who are in the inside of the White House or the inside of individuals like Diddy or Barack Obama or things like that, I tend to question, what does this have to do with salvation? What does this have to do with the end game of the word of God? If you call yourself a bishop, then I have to then judge righteously for that. And you're following people are following this individual in such a way where I would comment, even as of last night, you should listen to Bishop Gaiters, listen to him, listen to this, where I see no one in the comments. Wait a minute, did we test this with the word? Did we test this with individuals? Do we know anybody that has spoken? Do we know anything about his life? There's nothing. And that's how I knew, okay, there's something here that is entrapped people, almost like a hypnosis gaze as well. I don't know if you are super into the deliverance things and the demonic realm, but it almost felt like, what are you hypnotizing the body of Christ for? And why are they so compelled to listen to garbage that is outside of the will? That's what I never understood. It wasn't even a week ago where I was sitting with my family in our living room. I was watching an interview with a young lady, and I can't remember the woman's name, but it was as of recent, I believe. And he said he was prophesying, and I use quotations because I don't play the prophetic. I have to, everything that I prophesy to individuals, I have to speak. Everything needs to be judged by him and him alone. So anything I say, I got to make sure I'm holding myself accountable. So long story short, he said to her, everything you've been through, all the sacrifices you've done, it's all come to pass. I'm like, okay, well, that's very surface level, right? But where's the meat of it all? So when they really got down to the nitty gritty of the interview, it began to be more spiritual. It began to, for example, he said, we want to teach people, their true selves. We want to teach people to deal with trauma and to deal with themselves. We have all kinds of listeners. I love that all kinds of listeners are open to hear, I guess, a Christian rhetoric, but this isn't Christian rhetoric. I will never stand with someone who is of the new age, no matter how you package it. If you say you're spiritual and you say you want to open to the mind of God and you want to be of the mind of God, that's not what the word says. What it says was, hey, if you are called on my name and you seek myself and pray and you're humble and you seek myself and turn away from your wicked ways, then you'll hear from heaven. That was nothing of the conversation. It's always dealing with the mind of God and the conspiracies of God. And that's where it confuses so many people. And it developed a burning sensation of enough is enough. People are falling for this hypnotic lie that he's not even a bishop at all. In
Well, let me
fact,
ask you about that. Yeah,
go
please tell
ahead.
us. He's not a bishop at
He's not a
all.
bishop at all. He created that name. In fact, when you are a bishop, you are actually formally ordained as well. It's actually, you sign a license and a contract through someone who is actually overseeing over you. So for example, there's only one bishop in my family. His name is Bishop Gaiters, but he's the only bishop in Columbus, Ohio as well. That is actually ordained. He actually has a church and it's in Columbus, Ohio. That's my uncle, Bishop Gaiters. That's the only Bishop Gaiters that we have. My father created this name Bishop Gaiters because one of his main desires is to travel and to preach. It was to be on the forefront. That's him. Yes, that's my uncle. Major, give honor and praise to him as well for his life. But that's the only Bishop Gaiters that is ordained, that is licensed, that has laid down his life for the body of Christ. That's the only one.
And forgive me for
So,
interrupting, but
you're
just
okay.
to speak to the credibility, your father never presented any church webpage like this that said that he was the pastor. He never presented
Right.
any credentials of being ordained. It's interesting. So is James Gaiters, is this your uncle, your father's brother,
That's
or
my
how is,
uncle.
but he's your father's
That is
brother,
my
or?
father's uncle. That's my great uncle
Uh-huh.
as well,
Uh-huh.
I
So
believe.
Larry
Yes.
Gaiters is James Gaiters Sr.'s nephew. Is that right?
Right.
So
Right.
he sort of got the idea of maybe he sees his uncle and says, wow, everybody really respects you when you're a bishop. If I could kind of follow some of his lead and just kind of fake it till I make it and convince people I'm a bishop, who's going to ask
Right.
anyway? And you know what? Those
Right.
questions, Lydia, whenever they came up, your father is an interesting case because he's obviously very intelligent and very adept at deceiving people. Now, you're talking about faith and religion and conspiracy theories and stuff like that. And it's interesting because I have perhaps more of a sense of how he combined those things. And I think he used them to manipulate people, you know. When a
Absolutely.
con man operates, he gains your confidence. And a lot of
Right.
times, you know, people who are very close to religion are very reliant on faith. And if somebody comes
Right.
along saying things that align with what they believe, unfortunately, there is a tendency to just trust that person. And this is where it becomes so treacherous with social engineers because we need to have, unfortunately, in this modern world, a healthy skepticism of anybody we meet. But you also have to, you don't want to alienate every single person and distrust anyone you meet. So there's this back and forth where you're trying to decide and discover if a person is trustworthy. And with your father, I got to a point where, you know, you saw there were quite a lot of videos there. He had interesting information
Right.
about things that I knew really nothing about. The Boule, and he spoke about how Kobe Bryant was involved in all kinds of things. And he really captured people's attention. And when I
Did.
started pressing him for facts and evidence, that was where he became uncomfortable and our relationship broke. So what could you share with us for people who perhaps, you know, someone's going to watch this and just say, oh, we don't know this young woman. She could have some agenda. She's got a beef with her father. What could you share with us, Lydia, that would help satisfy people with evidence in support of the things that you're saying? I believe you, but I like to cover off all those type of questions, you know?
Firstly, thank you so much for saying that. I want to give people the opportunity that they have a right to their opinion, right? I will never want to combat with their thoughts or minds or sway, right? The only thing I can hope is that through this conversation that God will open up their mind and open up their heart to see, okay, at the end of the day, the position is about a soul. At the end of the day, the position is about maybe this is the only chance for him to say, wait a minute, it's time for me to wake up and come back and say, I need to stop the lies. So that's going to be the main position for that. But if you notice, a lot of his videos are formed behind trauma, but the timing is always right. For example, if there is a catastrophe, again, you know, just what happened to our former President Donald Trump, that the assassination that happened over his life, let's say that happened with another individual that was big, there will be a video made within the next day or two because his element of pursuit is always based behind trauma. When you have no backing on integrity, the only backing that you have is based on surprise. Look at this now. Look at the news I found. Because it doesn't give enough people time to really marinate as to what really happened in that situation. So what happens is when a traumatic or catastrophe happens, like Kobe Bryant or things like that, he's going to play off of that event and say, I'm not going to give enough people time to think for themselves, to have a free thinker. I'm going to create a video which will spark other conspiracy theories, which will spark other popular rhetoric, you know, and things like that. And that's how he develops his audience.
Yeah.
Trauma is the baseline of it all. If you notice the timeline, if you look at, especially with Kobe Bryant, he made that not long after his passing,
Oh, right
and he
away.
will then, right, he will also then try to bring some sort of prophetic approach, and it's easy to do when you've been deceitful all your life. here's what it means. If I know how to capture the emotion of the ears who don't know the word, then I'm able to capture the trauma. And once I capture the trauma, I can gather on their heartstring and pull them in. Because at the end of the day, they're desperate for someone to say, oh, wait, now I understand. Oh, now I'm spiritual. Oh, now I understand what's happening to Obama and what's happening to Trump, what's happening to all these people. Because if you listen to this person, he told me what happened. Why? Because the timing and deceit follows back behind their trauma. Trauma never goes back and asks for a second opinion. It
And
never
you know, your
does.
father made
It
no
will
secret of
always.
this. He would use the
Mm-mm.
word all the time, speak about trauma
Right.
and
It's
victimhood.
all in your
See,
face.
the thing that he did that was so strange, Lydia, he was very skilled at weaving fiction into intriguing facts.
Yes.
And so, to your
Yes.
point that he was speaking about Luciferianism and that sort of thing, he presented it as, he's a man of God and he's speaking out against this and his understanding of historicity. He had all kinds of colorful ways of speaking. And
Right.
I mean, that was the confounding thing, is that some of the information that he raised about Kobe Bryant and some of the other, I forget this actor's name, who was the Black Panther who died. But you're right. Anytime something like that
Yes.
happened, he would have a story, and Kanye and everything.
Right. Yes. That was huge as well, because the one point, if you ever want to know if someone will use the Black Panther actor, his name is slipping my mind
Yeah.
as well. But
Bowman, is that it? Chadwick Bowman?
Bowman, Chadwick Bowman, thank you, Chadwick Bowman. He did a movie, I believe it was called Ore Ma's, something with Ma. It was Netflix. And this is cancer was eating his body from the inside. And the very last monologue he did was definitely not just anti-Christ, but he said the most horrific things that anyone could ever say about the
Wow.
Lord before. I mean, it was, I won't even repeat it because it's so bad. And then not even a month later, he passes. If you want to know someone's in it for the spiritual and really for someone's soul with Christ, they would have spoken that moment. But yet he always speaks on these, yes, Ma Rainey's, yes, there was a monologue in there. I encourage, if you any listeners are curious, is what I mean. The 4-minute monologue that he cursed Christ out completely to pieces, and it broke something. When I watched that, I said, he just signed his letter to saying this is it for me. And if he was really interested in the body of Christ of that, he probably should have focused his mind on that, but he didn't, because it's always on events, trauma, and pulling his audience, right? Because it's a sprint race for him. It's been a sprint race even when he was involved in my life, which was well over 20 years ago. In fact, I haven't seen him over 20 years.
Wow.
So,
Oh
right.
my, Lydia, I'm so sorry. Tell us a bit about that. What provoked? So your father, tell us that story. How did that happen?
Yes. From what I can remember, I remember sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, and my brother was very, very young at the time. I was 10 when he officially left. It's right after when my grandfather passed. He did arrive to my grandfather's funeral. But I was sitting in her dining room, and she had a stack of china behind her. And we were sent a doll. My mother actually gave it to me. And I called my mother and I said, what's going on? Where is he? And she told me, well, he decided to leave. But I also found out that he wanted to just travel around the world and preach. So I saw a video of him in Jamaica, I believe. It was a country. And I didn't hear from him for months, days, missed birthdays, missed everything. We didn't have any contact with him at all, except we saw him laying on the beach, talking with all kinds of people, and then taking up a revival in Jamaica when we're sitting here in my grandmother's kitchen. And I remember my mother till this day, where I thank God, because there was no financial support with my father. There was no financial backing with my father, even when he was in the house. To make things a bit deeper, to better understand this, when my father left, there wasn't one dime of child support. My mother was stuck with doing everything on her home. everything on our own. When it comes to the home, when it comes to feeding, when it comes to making sure we're in school, when it comes to just the basic necessities and then some, it was all by herself. And yet the only update that I can receive is Bishop Larry Gaiters will be in town, or Bishop Larry Gaiters will be in this revival, or Bishop Larry Gaiters be in this. And I said, how is it that an individual claims to be a bishop, but we cannot get in touch with him at all? Plenty of broken promises, plenty of lies that I couldn't keep up with. And I grew up with knowing, you know what? This is never going to happen. So I just have to be from the outsider looking in, from a 10-year-old girl to now I'm 31 now, who's married, thank God, by the grace of God, with an amazing mother and an amazing husband, to see this individual is still doing the same thing, and it's
Wow.
still pulling the same lies. Yes.
Wow. I mean, that's an amazing story. Congratulations to your mother and you and your brother. It's such a testament to your
Thank you.
personal strength of character to be able to kind of overcome that. I'm so sorry that that happened to you, Lydia. So what, you haven't spoken to him in 20 years. Did you see any of these videos? It was very surprising to me when he and I parted ways. He basically immediately started doing videos with Roseanne Barr, of all people, which I found quite strange because obviously Roseanne is, I mean, at one point she was kind of the biggest comedy celebrity. Certainly maybe a TV show was like number one. And now here she is doing videos with your father, who we both agree is something of a con man. By the way, that's my pure opinion when I state that. Lydia is sharing her opinions, and I just want to qualify the things we say as opinion. They're based on Mr. Gaiters' behavior and things that we've observed in the public domain. Of course, in Lydia's case, this is her firsthand experience with the guy. He's her father. So what do you hope will come from speaking with me and putting this video out? What would you like to see happen next, Lydia?
Just that those who are listening to not just wake up, but to say, wait a minute, something's really not wrong. Don't base it off of my opinion. I'm just saying, right? I am a mortal human who will fail you, right? But the only person, the only God that won't fail you is Jesus Christ. So I just would want them to challenge everything that I say, put it back with the word, research, right? Go back and watch every video. But I want them to see and say, this individual, please stop following him. Please stop watching videos. Please stop putting money into his pocket. I haven't seen him over 20 years, but I want to make sure I clarify. We did have a verbal conversation. The last time we spoke was on Father's Day. And in fact, we were getting into Father's Day, and I said, hey, I wanted to just shoot a quick message and see how you were doing. How's everything going? He interrupted the conversation and said, hey, I'm still waiting on your mother to handle certain things. And I said, well, that's unfortunate, because at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. If there is something that you need, if there's something that you want to do because your lies are catching up with you, you have to show up for yourself. So I said, that's unfortunate. So he didn't like my answer on Father's Day. Keep in mind, I told my brother that I called him on Father's Day to be the bigger person. And so he told me, you know what, I'm going to send a quick message. As I'm talking to my father, he says, you know what, your brother, why don't he just, as an individual, just grow up and call me back? And I said, you can't say that to a grown man who you've been out of his life over 20 years. He's almost 30 years old. He's a grown man. He will never look at you that way. He said, well, as an individual, he's not an individual. That's your kid. So in order to really get to the heart of his mind, I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. And I can feel myself getting heated while speaking to him. But then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not speaking to that, I'm speaking what's behind him. Those who have spiritual ears can understand, right? But I started to say, that's unfortunate that you think of him as an individual. And I said, Dad, your your kid almost died 3 times on his deathbed, 3 times. Well, did you know that I almost died and no one called me? And I remember I was talking about my accident and he complained that I didn't tell him. I said, because I almost lost my life. I saw bodies fall out of cars. I saw people on the ground. My husband was the one taking control of the wheel, and you're worried about me, someone updating you?
Whoa.
Your priorities are out of whack.
What
So he
was
said,
this accident?
going,
This sounds crazy. What was that? A car
yes,
accident?
it was 2022 that happened. March of 2022, I was headed to my church via ministries, international ministries. And I was headed to my church and just got off the phone with my best friend. And I said, hey, I'm on my way there. My sweet husband was tired. So I said, you know what? I'm going to take the wheel today. Okay. It looked like a beautiful day, but all of a sudden it got really, really icy and snowy. And I said, you know what? I think we'll be okay. We're right at the exit. All of a sudden, it went almost like gray pitch black. I told my husband, I said, hey, I don't have control of the wheel. I can't do this. And I actually, for a moment, I my hands were on the wheel like this, and I lifted up my hands, and my husband, he like screamed at me in covering, not as in mad. He said, scoot over and let go of the wheel. So I let go of the wheel, and he turned the wheel, and we ran into the median. And if it wasn't from him grabbing the wheel by the grace of God, we would have been in the same catastrophe as everyone else. I got out screaming and crying. And I said, are those bodies on the ground? And I said, I don't think they're moving. And I said, let me go across the street. He's like, no, don't go across the street. It's icy. There's trucks there. There's a semi that turned over, 5 cars. And even when we got into an accident, all was boom, 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 car after car after car. It was about a
Wow.
10-car pileup.
Wow.
And people, excuse me, and people were flying out the window. And I am
Wow.
just screaming. But we found out that no one passed away by the grace of God. No one passed away. And I didn't have access to my phone. Everything was lost. And so when we finally had a chance to catch up, my brother called a meeting, a family meeting, because he wanted the family to come together. He said, Lee, I know, you have your thoughts about dad, and he has been dishonest his whole life with us, but I want to give him a chance to kind of set the table straight. So it was actually my brother, and I want to give credit to him because he's such an individual. He forgives fast, no matter how many times you may hurt him or burn him, he will still give out your hand even if you spit in it. It's a gift from God. I'm still praying on, okay? But he called us all, our whole family on the call. It was my mother, myself, and my brother. And I was sitting in the car, and my brother said, hey, we're all on here for one purpose. Dad, we want to hear you out. We want to forgive you. We want to, be in a position where you're able to share your thoughts. And he had me go first. And I said, Dad, you've been living a lie for years, and you have set up a table of you being in a dark hole. And if you do not wake up, and if you do not say, you know what, I'm living a big lie, then before you know it, you may lose your life, and there's no one else that can save you. So he didn't really like that too much in a short story. My father responded, you know, Lydia, I'm blessed beyond measure, and you just need to let it go, because I let it go of leaving you guys at 10 years old, of not being a financial support and lying every single way possible, because I've forgiven myself and let it go. Therefore, you just have to let it go. So my mother interjected. She's so wise. If you ever get a chance to speak with her, her words are sharp as a knife. It's to the point where you understand what's happening. It's like, okay, I'm understanding this together. She said, let me stop you right there. I hope I do her words justice. I'm paraphrasing. She says, the problem that I have that I've recorded. And my father interrupted her, and he said, I didn't know you were recording me. But because he wasn't listening, he was actually writing it down, right? A good listener waits for the enemy in this case to shoot his shot. Let's see what all you have on the table. And she responded and she said, let me stop you right there. I'm troubling understanding that you're telling your own children, and you're telling really anyone who's in your life, and this is including his family. I don't know who he's done wrong with his family as well, to just let it go. That's not how it happens. You have a
Yeah.
responsibility as a father to actually say, you know what, I'm wrong. You know what, I'm sorry. And my father kept interrupting and said, no, I'm sorry. You guys just have to let it go. And Lydia, you're just dealing with so much anger. And I said, I'm not angry. It's passion. I'm passionate because you're on here every single day. I remember a time, and I hate to kind of skip, but this is just to keep the short stories long. But the conversation previously on our family call, he pretty much said, you know what? I understand the mind of God. And Lydia, once you get to the mind of God, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I'm not in a black hole. I'm blessed beyond measure. Everything I've ever wanted, I have. And I said, that's exactly how the enemy wants you. When you're in a prison, he makes it comfortable where you know that you're not in a prison until it's too late. And when the door shuts and it closes and the key locks away, you then wake up and say, what happened? How did I get here? I'm flying around. I'm with Trump. I'm with all these people. And I'm no hate on Trump. Okay. I believe in we vote for who God tells you to vote for, okay? But I'm with celebrities and I'm with this. I said, that's
But
not
but
the cost of it.
is he actually? He's not with Trump. He's making that up, right?
He's making, right, right. I believe he just positions himself and takes pictures with these people to, engulf this, hey, look at me, I'm bigger than what I am. Hey, look at me, I'm bigger than what it is. So we ended that conversation, and actually my husband, I was on the phone and he grabbed my phone with me and he said to him, he said, you haven't been in her life just like this in over 20 years. And I've taken the position of taking care of her now. I thank you for what so-called services were, but I'm taking the role of her husband, and he took control. And that's kind of where we stopped for about, I would say, 2 years. And then we kind of picked back up um, this past Father's Day. And as of recently, my brother just graduated college from Grand Canyon University. He is super successful. He is just on not just gifted in music. He plays the piano. He's gifted in, he writes his own music. He just is on fire for God, and he's so successful. But I have such a passion with my brother because there was a time when my father asked him for funds. And I don't like to embarrass people, but I think this is very important because I need to expose something behind this today. He asked my brother, hey, I need the fund. He knows not to ask me because I'm going to hold his feet to the fire, right? He calls me his princess, and I last spoke, I said, I'm not your princess. In fact, I'm still getting to know who you are. The only thing in common we have is that we look alike. We sound alike. That's the only thing. But my brother didn't listen because he loves people and he loves to see the good in people. He gives my father money. And a few years later, he then tells me he needs to grow up and be a man and just call me back. And he didn't invite me to my graduation, when in fact, that is a lie. He did. I don't know if there was a miscommunication or he accidentally deleted on his phone, but I have proof that my brother invited him to his graduation. And my brother calls me, and he's never like this with people. He said, Lydia, he didn't say Lydia, he said Sid. That's what he calls me. He said, I'm at my wit's end. I'm pretty much done because for him to come on my phone and to tell you that I didn't invite him when I did is a bold-faced lie. I've given him everything I've had. I've forgiven him. I've given him money when he needed it. It wasn't even 5 years ago that he needed money, but that he was still professing this famous preacher. But yet
Yeah.
behind the scenes, he was struggling. And behind the scenes, he's running from place to place. My father loves skipping states. He's lived everywhere. He's lived in Zanesville, he's lived in Ohio, he's lived in Michigan, he's lived in New York, and now he's in California, presumably. I don't know where he is. And even when I say, hey, can we come and see you? It's, oh, let me come see you. I say, well, what's the point? Why can't we see
Wow.
what's going on? Now we're connecting the
Let me
dots.
pause
There's
you for a
something
second,
behind
Lydia,
there.
because you're saying so
Mhm.
many interesting things here. So,
Sure.
everything that you are describing and how he behaves with you, the changing of the addresses and the difficulty in contacting him, these are all
Right.
behaviors that I see that caused me to wonder if he was a social engineer. But this is what social engineers do. They have an influencing message that they're putting out, and
Right.
yeah, needing money and all the things that you're describing. I mean, it sounds like your father. I'm not a mental health professional, and everything that I'm sharing here is my opinion based on your observations, my observations of him, his public behavior. It sounds to me like he's got a little bit of psychopathic tendency,
Absolutely.
non-violent, but to be able to
Yes.
abandon his family in the way that you're describing, have no feeling whatsoever, to have the
Right.
audacity to call you his princess as if you grew up on his knee going to Disney World or something with
Absolutely.
him,
There we go.
when he's made you a stranger, is really quite insulting. But I detect, and perhaps this is your background, the turning of the other cheek and stuff. I'm not good at that. I hold grudges, but that's a
That's
separate
okay.
story. Tell me what it is that you'd like to see happen, because it sounds like even though all these things that he's done are pretty awful, it seems like you'd still like to reconcile with him. Is that what I'm detecting?
Absolutely. Not even reconcile. Let me put it in this way. Even if we don't ever reconcile, right? I know the emotions of a human being are changing daily, but it's his soul at the end of the day. I I question all the time why I look like him, why we're similar sometimes, and I hate to get emotional, but it's important because I question it a lot. And as I grew up, excuse me, to all your listeners, I'm trying to get this out
It's
here.
okay. Don't
But as
worry.
I grew up, I questioned, why am I like this? Why do I look like him? Why are we twins? And yet I'm begging for someone to call me their daughter. And that has been an outright struggle almost all my life. But by the grace of God, I'm not crying because I'm sad. Let me make sure that's clear. I'm crying because I'm so grateful that God has provided fathers in my life who has taken control and has taken say, hey, I know this individual it was your blood father, but God has sent me to be your daddy. God has sent me to be your father to cover you. And I just want to give a major shout out as well to Apostle Steve and my apostle and our chief apostle here at our church, and to Pastor Jerry Hunt, who married my husband and I, who is in Bowling Green, Ohio. And Apostle Steve is in Kampala, Uganda. So, but God provided that. So, with me questioning our similarities, I also had this fear of, I don't ever want to be like that when I grow up. In fact, sometimes I will call my mother and I said, Mom, if I ever sound like him, if I ever make these similar gestures, or if I start to tweak like him or any way, can you please just pull me out? And that has been an absolute fear. And I remember she told me, and she said, I need to stop you right there, because you're never going to be like that, because my heart is laid down for Christ. That's the biggest difference, is that if I die today, I have to answer to every single thing that I say. If it's people, saving people from not just hell, but people from being delivered of the illusion of hypocrisy that this individual, and let's even talk Christian terms, the spirit that's taking control of my father, I want to see him delivered. I want to see him set free. I want to see him wake up and say, even if he never talks to me again, because this is the truth hurts. This is going to be hard if he sees this, and his following is going to see it. But I don't care, because my judgment comes from one God and one God alone. And I lay my life down every single day for the God who raised me up every single day and gave me breath. So it's just for his soul. It's for him to say, you know what? I need to stop, because this whole Christian thing is a real thing. I need to stop. I'm playing with people's minds. I'm playing with people's families. I'm playing with people's money. And if that's going to be the case to shut the kingdom of darkness down, then put me on the sword 1,000 times. I'm willing to do it. That's what it is. So less of reconciliation. If we do, that's going to be the icing on the cake. I still love them. I have to, right? I have a mandate to. But at the end of the day, it's the body who listens to him, to stay clear away from him. There is a strange form of not just hypocrisy, but a strange sense of witchcraft. It's witchcraft has a unique, it's not just in black hats, it's not just in, speaking in different languages and doing spells and Halloween, right? When people are really good at witchcraft, they look like preachers, they look like conspiracy theories, because if they sound a little bit like the Bible and then put more conspiracy on there, then that's enough for people to start sowing into that. So it's just to wake up the body of Christ and to say, you know what, there is a God that's real, and we're going to figure this out and to search for the truth themselves.
Well, I have some interesting information to share.
Mm.
It is with tremendous confidence that I can tell you, I do believe your father has seen this video, or is at least aware of it. I tagged him here on X, and oh, look. So I don't think he's too happy about it. But
Of course he's not.
Lydia, I really appreciate you sharing this stuff with us. And just to, not to contradict you, but my own input would be, I don't necessarily advise people not to look at or listen to what Larry Gaiters is saying. But if you choose to do that, I would advise that you take into consideration what Lydia has told us and give it your consideration. Obviously, I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do, but I share
Right.
your opinion. even without having the extensive experience with him that you have. I feel like he deceived me and worked to deceive my audience. And the thing that's super interesting, Lydia, is that we've got a bunch of people with us who were watching your father's shows, and I think shared my suspicion, and their thoughts are being confirmed by what you're saying right now. One thing that Prague was saying, and this is true, a technique that your father used, and again, I'm not saying that anybody who does this is deceiving people, but I do want people to become more aware of these social engineering tactics so that when they encounter someone on the internet or in their life like your father, they might be more well equipped to make these determinations for themselves. And what Prague had said, I'm curious to hear your response to this. And I noticed this as well. When I would raise points on the show, your father would be effusive with praise, agreeing with what I would say, how smart I was, and how insightful this was. And it's part of the tactic to really sort of butter up the target.
Right.
And then when you're like, oh, this person's making me feel smart and important.
Right.
Have you seen him do that sort of thing, that kind of manipulation?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. He did it with me before. I thought at one point we were going to be on the same page on something. He will. He does this unique thing of it. I call it the word filler. And the one who corrects me the most is my mother, because she said, once you stop the word filling, because that's proof that you not only do you not have enough knowledge in the subject, you're just trying to prove to the other audience that exactly what they're talking about. So if you're telling me we're going to talk about the city of Italy and all their history, and I know nothing about it, right? Knowing that, but I'm going, yes, absolutely, yes, exactly. I'll do little movements like this. I'll do little things like this. I'll do little things like this, and I will create this sense of I am wise enough to agree with you. Therefore, if I agree with you long enough, then you'll believe that I actually have the knowledge in what I'm talking about, because he has to gain your trust. So those exactly, and yes, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, and these lookaways and things like that, right? These are all, when you turn your eyes or you see people kind of twitching like this, exactly, yes, this all the time.
All the
And looking
time.
away and drinking the water. I mean, everything is about the act. When you have to prepare to be something you're not, you have to study all the mannerisms, because the moment you stand still too long is the moment the truth comes out. Because wait a minute, where is Larry? Where is the bishop? What's happening? I thought he was the one that knew all the answers. But this isn't going to cut it anymore. This coming on and donating and being with Roseanne Barr and is not going to cut it anymore. I don't care if her followers come after me, because guess what? She's not coming after me. She's coming after the God who fights for me. I don't have to do all of these fidgetings, right? All I know is that we have to speak the truth, and we have to speak the truth to the people who are listening at the end of the day. So it's funny that you mentioned those mannerisms. So now you see what I mean. Those are huge. He will do that to make sure that he gains your trust. And that is probably the biggest, I would say, narcissistic behavior. Again, I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I'm not diagnosing anyone, but those are huge narcissistic behaviors, because they have a way of turning the show light towards them, of turning the victimhood toward them, of turning the I am elite, I'm liberated, I'm blessed beyond measure. Look at the pictures. I'm going to be taking pictures with every single celebrity individual. Little do they know that I'm blessed to work with individuals who are related to those certain people. And I'm going to keep their names hidden, of course. But they even told me there was something about him they couldn't quite get why they were hanging around these certain individuals. And they said you hit it right on the nail, and I have their support as well. And they've just been such a blessing in my life. But it's just that head over shoulders moment, that if I talk like this, and if I bring off this preacher voice, and then if I say, Biden has these things and Trump has these things, and there's been an elite, for example, I'm going to say something that might sound like I know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Kamala Harris said that she is going to step out in a new nomination. Basically, what that means, I have a point of contact that says that she is not involved in the everlasting conspiracy theorist papers. What does that mean? It means that her name isn't Kamala. It means that her name isn't Harris. It means that she's not Black. I know nothing about this woman. but I got you to believe, right? I
Right.
got you hooked on something, right? Based on events that's happening now. And if I can pull onto that trauma because you won't research the scriptures for yourself and you're the person, then I got you.
Yeah.
Got it.
Your father's a unique subject in that
Mm-hmm.
he is able to combine this type of religious preaching with something that's almost akin to like the flow of a freestyle rap or something. He's obviously very intelligent
Right.
and confusing character, but Lydia, I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate you coming on the show and joining us. I want to let everybody know that they can follow you on TikTok. You are there.
Yes.
It's Mrs. Sam's
Yes, that's my married
0521.
name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your husband's last name, your last name, of course,
Yeah.
Mrs. Sam's. And people can follow you there on TikTok.
Yes.
Anything you want to say to everyone before we wrap up the show?
Of course. Number one, thank you so much, Jason, for your time. I know that this isn't the easiest thing to do for the both of us, especially with this amount of following, but I am just so grateful that you've given the time and the space to hear the truth. And I can only pray by God's grace that we continue this path, that more and more people will wake up and see, wait a minute, let me search for myself. Don't base it off of my word, right? I'm nobody but a servant of Christ. That's all I can get, all I can give to you. But if I can get people to say, wait a minute, who is this? Who is the real God called Jesus Christ? And let me search for myself. That's all that matters. And I just thank you for your time and all your listeners as well. And I look forward to speaking with you all even more coming soon.
Thanks for joining us, Lydia. And it's a good message. People
Pleasure.
should use discernment in evaluating everything they see, whether it's
Right.
on Crowdsource the Truth, the news, the internet,
I think
anywhere.
so.
If
Right.
you enjoy the show, you can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsource the truth, crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, and subscribestar.com, and patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. I will be back later tonight with a very special sponsor exclusive show with John Cullen. So if you're not yet a sponsor, please become one. I want to thank my guest, Lydia Sams. Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Sams.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And good luck with everything. I hope you can find some happiness. Thanks for watching.